Hey, y'all, and welcome to At Home with Littles, a podcast where moms help moms by sharing what works for them and their families. Each week, we'll get to chat with a true expert, a fellow stay at home mom. I'm Katie Schultz, your resident non expert, and this week, I get the pleasure of chatting with Rebecca McCoy. Rebecca is a non-stop spout of wisdom. When thinking of who should be on the podcast, she was a no-brainer. Her children are 7, 5, and 3. She homeschools, works part-time, and manages plenty of other responsibilities. And yet, she prioritizes rest. I look up to her for the way she runs not only her house, but her life. I hope you leave this conversation feeling encouraged and with a fresh perspective. Let's get into it. Rebecca, thank you for joining me. Will you share your family's ages and names to start us off?
Thank you for having me. I'm Rebecca. My husband is Robert. We've been friends for 25 years and married for 12. I have 3 kids. My oldest son is Joshua, and then I have 2 daughters, Caroline, who's 5, and Eliana, who's 3. Joshua is 7.
We're going to get into so many things like homeschooling, and then I know you work outside the home, and there are so many things on your plate. I feel like a great place to start before people start comparing themselves to you is something that you said whenever we first met, which is that you are a high capacity person. And you said it in a way of like, this wasn't a value statement. It was just kind of who you are. Can you speak to that a little bit in case there's a listener who starts to
Mhm.
compare their load to yours?
Yeah, oftentimes God has wired me as a high capacity person through some traumatic experiences and different things in my past that have led to me being that way. While it has some hard and negative background, it also has been a way that God has gifted me and allowed me to step into some of the roles that He's given me really well. And so it's not a good thing or a bad thing when people hear what I'm doing. The tendency that I hear back a lot is like, oh, I should do this and I should do that, or I wish I could do more like you. And I'm like, no, don't wish that because God has wired me this way and He's wired you to be you too.
I think it's good to give permission for people to figure out what their capacity is. And I'm sure it's been an interesting journey for you to figure that out in each season. So, to start off, just talking about this season, Rebecca, what is currently on your plate?
I am married, so my marriage, and I am a mother of 3. I homeschool. My oldest child is in first grade, and then my middle child is pre-K, a little bit of kindergarten starting. So I homeschool them, and then I work part-time. I'm an executive assistant in private wealth management. I work from home, and then I'm in the office maybe once or twice a month, so not a lot. And let's see, I co-lead a community group at our church with another lovely couple. I'm on a board. There's a couple of other different random things, but those are the big ones.
And that's changed since I've known you. And so I'm sure that that is something that is constantly fluctuating. I think whenever I hear that from someone whose kids are not in full-time care, my question is like, what are your kids doing while you are doing all of this? That feels so overwhelming. So maybe we can start with homeschooling. You have a 7, 5, and a 3-year-old. Are you homeschooling while one of them is napping? Is everybody doing some kind of homeschooling curriculum together? How does that work?
It's everybody at the dining room table, and Eliana usually has something copied, like similar to what the big kids have. I just run it through the copiers. If Caroline is working on coloring, then Eliana has that coloring page too, and she's working on it. And then I also structure things so that whatever is the most applicable to everyone is first, and then I tailor down in hardness or move up in difficulty so that as kids lose interest, they appropriately wander
And
off.
and Joshua's eventually left the last one standing. Beautiful.
Yes.
And then already sounds like a lot of work and a lot of thought that you put into it. When are you doing your homeschool planning?
Usually on the weekend, I'll do like an hour or 2 hours. When I teach a new concept, sometimes I need to sit down and look up the new concept that I'll be teaching. That's not a significant amount of time. Mostly it's just pulling things at the top of the week. I'll pull all the things that I need for the week and I'll just set them out. I do a stack for each day. And each day, as I finish like a subject or I finish the thing, I kind of prep the next day's work. So I spend one chunk on Sunday and then just do it as I'm going the day before.
What is your homeschooling philosophy as far as do you plan to homeschool them the whole way through? What's your thought on that?
We have in the past said that it's a year by year, kid by kid decision. I think that's a really good approach to valuing that each kid is going to have different strengths and weaknesses and different needs, different relationships with me as their teacher or with their dad. I think we more and more see that it might be more accessible to us to homeschool all the way through. I was homeschooled through 8th grade, and my husband was homeschooled through 12th grade. So we do have the background of knowing what it's like to go all the way through or for a long stretch of time, which I think makes it easier because nothing is brand new to us. We both have history
Yeah.
with the process.
I'm such an all-in mentality type of person. It truly was new, but the first time you said year by year, kid by kid, I was like, oh, you can go into homeschooling your first year and not already have the entire thing planned out. Like, how freeing that is.
Yeah, I think those things really evolve as our families grow and age and as we discover our kids' personalities and their strengths and their weaknesses. The family rhythms are going to look different in every stage. And so, like, I don't have anybody who naps anymore. So my rhythms look a lot different than they did when I had one or three nappers.
Family rhythms, traditions. I know that your mind works like mine in this, and you're so far ahead of me. This is the thing I love to like glean wisdom from you on. So can you share some of your favorite traditions and maybe how they came about?
Yeah, very early on, either when I was pregnant with my first child or shortly after he was born, Noelle Piper, John Piper's wife, has a book called Treasuring God in Your Traditions. And I read the book, and I can't really tell you what it was about, but I can tell you that it shaped the way I thought about traditions and the way I started evaluating what kind of traditions we wanted to have as a family. I think one of the biggest things is that as far as traditions, what things will I be sad if my kids are 18 and we didn't do consistently? Game nights, movie nights, inviting other people into our home, and then spending time with other people as a family outside of our home. So I started looking at what are some big things that I really would like for us to do consistently. Out of that was born Family Friday Fun Nights. Each month when I plan our month, I rotate through those four things. I plan on the calendar, mark down like this is the night that we're going to have a movie night. This is what we're going to watch. This is the night we're going to have a game night. This is the night that I'm going to invite a family over to dinner at our house, or we'll go meet them, hang out with them somewhere. And then this is a night that we will go on an adventure together as a family. So last week in our small town, we have a festival. We went and did the parade, and that was our family adventure. We watched the parade with some friends, and there was a carnival and some things like that. So that is one of our traditions. We do Saturday morning cinnamon rolls. My husband and I always did Saturday morning dates when we were dating. He would pick me up on Saturday morning, and we would go do breakfast together. I was still in college, so we would often end up somewhere, and his house, my house, college campus library, and I would study for the rest of the day, but Saturday morning breakfast was our time to connect. As we had kids, it wasn't as easy to go out for breakfast. And so I go to Costco and I buy the Annie's
Ooh.
cinnamon rolls. They're much cheaper at Costco than they are in the grocery store. And so we do that every Saturday. We pop a can of cinnamon rolls and cook some bacon and usually strawberries. So those are some of our basic weekly family traditions.
Those are some of the things that can feel like magic when you're looking back, but in reality, it's like mom management. One of the things I hear from you is that you batch a lot of that. It's not necessarily spontaneous and it's not even week by week. Do you feel like that's something that you have always done, or is that something you learned that you were like, this is something that's taking up too much time? Let's just nail it all down?
I think that's something I've always done as a mom. I don't think it's something I've always done in my life. I was very into bullet journaling in my mid 20s. And so bullet journaling forces you to stop and like create the calendar because it's not already made out. You're like drawing the calendar. And now I use a planner because I don't have time to draw the lines in a calendar. Doing it once a month helps me get my brain around the whole month. I still add things as they come in, but it helps me get my brain around the whole month. I batch plan.
I am taking notes, and I feel like anytime I am with you, I need a notepad open to take notes. This morning, we saw you at church, and this is just a great example of how quick you are with good advice. Like, there are people who give good advice, and there are people who respond quickly and give bad advice. But Rebecca responds quickly and gives good advice. My husband was talking to you about how I don't know exactly how this podcast is going to turn out, and I don't know exactly what it looks like. And you just immediately, whenever I walked up, said, Katie, go listen to the first episode of some of your favorite podcasts. I bet they are not like they currently are. I listened to the first episode of two of my favorite podcasts. One of them doesn't have the co host they now have. And the other one started off as an interview podcast and then turned into a solo podcast. And I'm like, okay, if they're allowed to learn, I guess I am allowed to learn also.
Yes, I love that you did that.
Your role as
Mhm.
an executive assistant, part-time role, I did want to go back to that. So I'd asked you what your other kids do while you homeschool. Can we talk about how you work part-time with all three of your kiddos home?
My job is a rolling job, so things come up throughout the day. Sometimes that's at 11 in the morning and sometimes at 11 p.m. at night. So I don't really have designated set hours. My job is kindly and graciously flexible, understanding that I have all my children home and that I homeschool. I don't answer the phone when I'm actively teaching. Yeah, there's a lot of times where I turn on the TV or I do have help. Usually, I have about 10 to 15 hours of help in my home that's either somebody watching the kids or somebody folding the laundry. I found that since I really like doing the homeschooling and teaching, and since my work can be sporadic, it's not really beneficial for me to have somebody that's dedicated to just watching my kids. It's really helpful for me to have somebody that's willing to come in and flex. So today, that person was with my kids for most of the day. I did my monthly run to the office, had a couple of meetings, and I sat in a coffee shop and just knocked out a lot of like admin and emails and catch up on things like that. And I placed my grocery order while I was at it. But like last week, that person folded and put away all of our laundry because we had had a stomach bug and I had massive piles of laundry and I needed that to happen while I homeschooled my kids. My kids play really well together. I've worked on and off most of the time that I've been a mom, so my kids have had to learn how to have independent play. I can often set them up with something like, here's Magnetiles and here's the Paw Patrol toys, and they'll get going, and that's great. But sometimes I do have to turn on the TV, and that's fine too.
What did it look like whenever you first started getting extra help in the house?
So when we were maybe in our second year of marriage, my husband and I were both working 50-hour work weeks. Our church does a really intensive 9-month theology study program. So we were both taking that and we were leading a community group and leading a service team. And so we were probably spending about 50 hours in our jobs and then maybe 15 hours on church related activities. I remember walking up to my husband. I'd written out the amount of time that it was taking me to do all of the household chores weekly. I walked up to him and I said, this is how much time I'm spending on all the things. I don't have this amount of time. He looked at the list and said, clearly, we need to hire somebody to come in and clean our house. And I was very surprised by that because I felt like his response would be, clearly, I need to help you more. But his response was, but clearly, we need to use some of the capital we're making to have somebody come in and help us. It took me a long time to wrestle with that. Like I said, yes, in that moment, because that was his leadership and that was his offer to help. His mom had raised 6 children and had always had somebody cleaning their house and then had often had a nanny. And she homeschooled all 6 of them. And so I knew that was the background he was coming from and what he was like. That was an area where I said, I'll honor your leadership in this, even though I don't agree with it. And even though it's hard for me. And so we've had help for 10 years in some form or fashion now. It was easier for me when I looked at everything on my plate to say, clearly,
Yeah.
I need help.
That's such great advice rather than the martyr motherhood, right? Of like, no, this is my job. I have to figure this out. I feel like I'm learning so much about the variety among people who are home with their children. There's so much variety. You see one small thing. Like she has someone who comes in for 15 hours a week that's not always paired with, and she homeschools and she works outside the home and she does XYZ. And so you're just taking bits and pieces from other people's lives. I keep acting as if it's not me doing this. I'm like, other people do this terrible thing, but I do this whenever I look at people and I'm like, I wish I had that. And then, yeah, I'm also not working outside of the home right now. So that's different.
Yeah, I love that people tend to say, oh, we all have as many hours in a day as Beyonce. And I'm like, but we don't all have the same resources that she does, or we don't all have the same commitments. So people cooking our meals and watching our kids, we all flex a little bit. And some people have their husband is home more and more flexible, and some people don't have that. And so, yeah, you're right. We only see snapshots.
Speaking of your husband, I love that when I asked you like what all is on your plate, that your first thing was that you mentioned that you're married. I first have to ask, is that a like was that a practiced thing? Is that naturally how your mind works? Or have you worked on knowing that should be something you say first?
It is not. My accountability group, the ladies in my MC, and some of my friends will often tack on to my list of things like, you're married, you have this relationship. As I think about the things on my plate, I try to remember honoring that and adding that in because it is another relationship that I work with every day.
And when I talked to some of your friends about what we should talk about, that was something that came up, was the way that you prioritize your marriage, and I would love to know, what does that look like for you?
So when it was just the two of us in our home, we did not prioritize specific time together because we were together all the time. We were doing marriage coaching with some leaders in our church, and they encouraged us to set aside specific time for our marriage. And so we did weekly date night from year two up until COVID, which would have been about 6 years in. We really hadn't done weekly date night 2020 through the end of 21. We hadn't done weekly date night. And we had a lot of really big shifts in our marriage in that season. We had a child and a family member to our home. My husband started running a new branch of his company. There were a lot of big shifts that happened during that season of COVID. And my husband looked at me and said, if we don't work to reestablish a date night practice, like I'm scared we'll look up in a year, in 2 years, and not know each other and be really surprised at where our relationship has gone and be in probably a not great place. And so I looked for a babysitter and found one. And I think it was within 2 or 3 weeks that we had weekly date night happening again. And so we have a babysitter that comes and watches our kids once a week. And in the early days of our marriage, where we didn't have as much money, we would have the babysitter come and go to a picnic or get ice cream, go for a walk together, just have somebody else come in the house, put the kids down and be with the kids because we found that bedtime is a really big drain for both of us, and especially my husband. After bedtime and putting all the kids down, we're just exhausted and we're done. We've been sitting in a dark room with the child in the quiet while they fall asleep,
Yes.
and now we're ready to go to bed. We don't want to have any conversation. We're tired and we're done. So that's been probably the number one way that we've prioritized our marriage.
I know that you've got a lot going on and you are a very, like, scheduled person. But in a general sense, do you have a pretty scheduled day with your kiddos?
Yeah. So I am over 7 years into parenting and a little over a year of not nursing. So my rhythms right now look really different than what they did when I had very tiny humans. I get up at 5 right now and read my Bible and nonfiction in the morning. I make a cup of tea, brush my teeth. I do that for about an hour and then I go to CrossFit. And when I come home from CrossFit, my kids are just starting to wake up. Robert heads into the office. I hop into the shower. I make us breakfast. And then I have a couple of kids that will make themselves breakfast. So breakfast can look a
Mm.
little bit rolling now because my kiddos can make themselves a frozen waffle or they can cut strawberries and find an apple, open a clementine, those kinds of things. Sometimes I'll end up taking a call or responding to a couple of emails if it looks like they've got a pretty good handle on what they're doing. And then most mornings after breakfast, we'll move into our first section of school, which is where we read our Bible and listen to a composer and we sing a catechism song and a hymn and do some scripture memory. We all do that together. From there, my morning flexes. By that point, we're about at like 9:30, 10. And sometimes everybody needs a break. Sometimes I need to respond to emails. Yeah, I think from there, it kind of just depends on what I need to do and where everybody's mood is at, honestly, because when the more kids you have, the more moods you're managing and the more personalities you're managing. We do 11:30 to 12:30 lunch. After that, I've always maintained a pretty rigorous quiet time rhythm. So my kids will go to their own separate spaces and I do 1.5 to 2 hours. My youngest kiddo, I'm working on, she gets to do like an hour of a activity in the same space with me, but she has to be quiet or listen to an audiobook. And then she gets TV time for that second chunk of that because she can't maintain the whole 2 hours.
And what are you doing during that quiet time?
A chunk of it is always a refuel time for me. I have used it and still use it to nap if I need to sleep. Will use it to read. It's a time of the day where I let myself read fiction. I love fiction, so I try to use fiction in certain spaces instead of letting it consume my entire day. I'll read fiction. I usually try to make another cup of tea or an afternoon decaf coffee. It's a moment where I have a snack and I sit and I try to be quiet. Sometimes that looks like I'm sitting and I'm being quiet with my cup of tea and work emails, but I do try to make a portion of it a pause for me.
I love that you mentioned hot beverages as, like, a staple in your day. I used to not care about them, and now if I don't have them, it's genuinely troubling to me. Like, I it gives me so much rest to be like, "I'm going to put Juliet down for nap, and then I'm going to make myself some tea."
I don't even know if I like tea yet, but it's beautiful.
Okay, well, if you're not sure about tea yet, we need to talk about the kinds of teas you're drinking. They'll help you get hooked. But there's something about that rhythm of putting the kettle on and the water boiling. It's something about the ritual that's calming. I think that's really been true through history. There's something about rituals, rhythms, and routines, just like taking a minute to take a deep breath. I could probably put the kettle on, hold something hot, and not even drink it, and it would still have a lot of
Mm.
the same calming for me just because of the ritual of it.
I need to read a quote from somebody who I texted asking them, what are some character qualities about Rebecca that we need to talk about? And I feel like this must be a writer friend of yours because of how beautiful this is. They said, as another stay at home mom, Rebecca's home is where I go for respite. A quiet, not in the literal sense, but a peace that communicates home is a good place to be. So many stay at home moms are afraid of being home. Rebecca welcomes people into her home as respite. It is a stronghold for the weary traveler. That, it's so
That's
kind.
so
It's
kind.
so beautiful. And if I had to guess, you're making tea for people as they come in. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. When somebody texts me that they're on their way, I put the pot on.
I fear that I might be that person who is a stay at home mom who's afraid of being home. You are more introverted than I am. And so I do think that that could be just like a natural, know thyself type of thing. But I'd also love to know what your relationship with truly being in your home is, how it's changed, maybe like any advice you'd give in that area.
I really do love being home. I find a lot of joy in my home. There are spaces that I've worked hard to create that are mine. So, my bedroom and my bathroom, I clear the toys out of it once or twice a day as need be. It's a space that if the rest of the house is a disaster, I can retreat to and know that that space is mine. It's picked up. I care a lot about things not being cluttery. And so, that space I really work to keep neat. So, if the rest of the house is a disaster and quiet time hits, I can grab that cup of tea and I can grab a book on my computer and I can retreat to my bedroom and know that it's a
Mm.
little bit of a sanctuary. I love puttering. I just love having my slippers on, being in my pajamas, ambling around my house. I don't know. I get the vision of like an old British man in a sweater at this point in what I'm saying, but I really just love rambling around my house. So it brings me a lot of joy to just be doing the small tasks. And it hasn't always been that way. I've read a lot of books just on homemaking and how homemaking is its own kind of sanctifying, and how in doing the small tasks day in and day out, there's elements of worship, elements of praise, moments of invitation to stop and pray for others, to worship the Lord. There's moments to invite people in and be hospitable. There's moments to look at your kids and offer them loving kindness through discipline, encouragement, prayer, through like, hey, we don't bite somebody. Just those small rhythms that seem day to day and mundane. I've really come to see those as a gift over time.
I feel like there are times I worry about over spiritualizing things, but I feel like that is an accurate spiritualizing of your home and knowing yourself. I think some things happen naturally versus making the conscious decision of my whole house cannot be clean at all times of the day, or all I'm going to be doing is cleaning, but I can have this one room. And that is like a life hack.
Yes, that's true. And I do have rhythms for when I pick up my house. Like after the kids go to bed, I walk around and I sort all the toys because at 5 a.m., when I wander out to the living room to make my cup of tea and read my Bible, I don't want to be stepping on a Lego.
There's a quote somewhere that's like, don't let your kids do things that make you hate them. And it's like, don't let your house be in such a way that you wake up mad at your kid. That's not kind.
Really great.
Okay, so you said like a part of quiet time every day is relaxing, doing something for yourself. Very practical question here. As a first-time mom, um, is there any part of you that is scared to nap while your kids are not necessarily asleep themselves? Like, at what age are you trusting that they're gonna be okay if they're not in a crib that looks somewhat like a jail cell?
My oldest napped until I cut him off around 4 because it was eating into my sleeping hours because he was still napping and then he was getting up at 5 in the morning. And my middle child never slept. So I was pregnant when my middle child was in the 18-month range. She just always has not slept a ton. I needed sleep, like that midday nap in that season of parenting. And so they make these door covers that you put
Yeah.
over doorknobs. We popped those on her doors so she couldn't open her door, and her room functioned like a crib, but it was more of a bigger open play space. I'm not going to tell you that everything was perfect because, she went through a stage where she thought she could change her own diaper. I'm going to have to replace the rugs in that room at some point. They've been steam cleaned, thoroughly cleaned by professionals, but there's some fallout from that, from the seasons where I just needed to sleep. I very early on with my firstborn, before I would fall asleep, I would really struggle to fall asleep, like worried that something would happen to him while I was asleep. And I would remind myself that God made him and that God loved him more than I ever could, and that God has already determined the days of his life. And I would trust him back to the Lord, and I would fall asleep. And so that's a big part of when I need to sleep. I trust my kids to the Lord and I sleep. Sometimes I'm sleeping in the same room that they're playing. The other day, it was just my youngest and I home, and I set a 15-minute timer. I looked at her and I said, Mom needs a nap. When this hits 0 and goes off, then I will wake up and read you that book. She stood beside me, beside the couch while I slept, and watched the numbers decrease for 15 minutes. It was great.
Incredible.
I slept, and I pray a lot that the sleep I get will be enough. Lord, let this, like, whatever window that I'm going to get here before somebody needs me, let it be enough.
I've been working on praying with Juliet before putting her down. The prayers started off very sweet and general, and they have become very specific and sleep oriented, and very much like, Lord, please let her sleep through the night. Lord, please let me sleep through the night. Please let this sleep be enough. Be with us.
Yes, that's very
Golly.
real.
Going back to quiet time, taking time for yourself. I also know that you implement a Sabbath, which we talked about as a church in our Holy Habits series. And when hearing about this, was like, I just want to talk to a stay-at-home mom about it. Taking a full day of Sabbath, I was like, what does that look like as someone who's home with their kids? I would love to know how you implement a Sabbath, and then also like how you prioritize rest when there's so many other things to be doing that feel like they need to get done.
Yeah, I'm going to address the prioritizing rest first because it's just right there at the top of my mind. When I was expecting, I don't remember which child, my best friend looked at me and said, do the things that only you can do. That's one of the biggest things that I do when I feel myself getting tired, when I feel myself hitting the end of my rope. I look around and I say, what are the things that are left that only I can do? And that number is usually pretty small. I can only order groceries, not because my husband can't order groceries, but because I do it all the time and I know the 8 things that I always buy that everybody in the house expects to see. Like, pretty much only I can order groceries. But anybody else in the house, my 3-year-old included, can bring the groceries inside and put them away. She might need help lifting the eggs up into the fridge, but that's about it. She gets a stool and she can do a lot of it. That's one of the biggest ways that I prioritize rest when I look at everything and see that there's more than can possibly be done, is like, what are the things that only I can do? And I do those things and then I stop. Sabbath and prioritizing Sabbath. I started very small with Sabbath. I started with 10 minutes holding a mug of something hot on my back porch watching the sunset. This was before I had kids. I have always been a person who goes and goes and goes. One of the downfalls of being a high capacity person, sometimes it's really hard to know when to stop. And a lot of friends in that season were looking at me saying, you've got to figure out how to stop. And so that was what I did. I gave myself 10 minutes. Over time, I fell in love with reading again as an adult. That's become an avenue for rest. And sometimes before kids, I set like I will read this many pages a day because that means that I'm sitting for this amount of time. When I had my firstborn, I recognized that I really needed the Lord, that I could not get through a day without God's help. And so I started reading my Bible more. And I've been the most consistent in my Bible reading as a mom just because I've realized my dependence on God so much, put more of a weight on my dependence on God. I've always had a full need for God, but that dependence feels more
Yeah.
significant to me now. And so as I spent time in the Word, I just started doing a mama rest day. It looked like one day where I stayed in my pajamas and didn't do laundry and I didn't do things. I just sat on the floor in a similar space where my kiddo had toys and I would read or play the piano or sleep, whatever I needed. And over time, that stuck. And so this year, we made some changes and I changed my rest day, and it did not work for my entire family. Like, it was a bad decision for the whole family. We said yes to a good thing this year that really changed our family schedule. And I've said no to it for next year. I'll be shifting things back to the way they were because it was just better for us. Friday is my Sabbath, and I try to stay in pajamas. We do Friday family fun night in the evening. Something about being in my pajamas helps me shift modes, be more restful. It helps me stop a little bit more or putter a little bit more. Yeah, I read my Bible. I let myself read more fiction than I do in other days of the week, and that's great. I think when my kids were little, the best thing I could do was rest where they were or where they played. It's really hard to rest in a separate space from your kids when they're really little because they need you more or they have more interruptions. Something about my nearness, they would settle in and play more calmly or for a longer stretch of time. It doesn't mean somebody's not brushing my hair or driving a Hot Wheel down my leg. Those things are happening, but it's still restful. I'm not up and about in the constant motion that I seem to have. And then there's a peacefulness in my soul too. I don't have the constant, I need to get this done and I need to get that done. I'm stopping and I'm trusting the Lord that if He holds the world together by the word of His power, then I can stop, I can rest. He'll keep the world spinning. It's not me
Yeah.
that keeps the world spinning. And that's been an important thing for me to learn. And it's an important thing for me to remind myself when I choose Sabbath and I choose rest.
And all of these things, of course, you're modeling to your kids as well. Like, you don't have to be moving every second of every day in order to be worthy and valuable. How aware are they of like Mama Rest Day? Like, do they have a clear understanding of it?
They know today is Mama Rest Day. Sometimes I'm more engaged with them because I'm resting, so I end up playing more with them. Sometimes it's really filling for me to have people over, then they know when they come over that I'm probably still going to be in my pajamas. Like that's kind of standard around here. I think that day you brought Jet over, I think I was still in my pajamas.
That's what I was thinking about. I was like, I think I remember you mentioning that and being like, you'll get used to it. It's great.
Yeah. So my kids know, and I'll tell them no that I won't do things because it's Mama Rest Day.
It
Yeah.
sounds like something your child would have said to you. Like, no, Mama, rest. No, Mama, rest. You have mentioned a few times in different seasons, you're like, a good friend told me. A good friend said this. It just sounds like you have really wonderful people in your life who speak truth to you, even if it's hard truth. I feel like I've heard this lie that as a mom, you don't get to have full conversations with other moms. Clearly, you are having good, fruitful conversations with other women in your life.
Yeah, a lot of this happened over text message. During COVID, a lot of them happened over Marco Polo. Um, a lot of them are voice text messages that I'm sending with moms. Pulled into my driveway today and fired off one from last Thursday that I needed to respond to. But then also, like, bring your children over. We'll put them all together, give them popsicles and a splash pad in the backyard, and we'll sit and talk. That's a great thing about putting kids together. It offers those opportunities. I also have a lot of friends who don't have kids. I have a lot of friends who are in different life seasons and life stages than me, and they're great about being patient with my kids and letting them talk, and then we shoot them back off to play. They trickle back in and we engage. I also think not being scared to have the hard conversations or delve into a conversation because you're going to be interrupted. One of the things I have to remind myself a lot is that the majority of Jesus' ministry happened in the interruptions. I can have conversations with another mom, be interrupted by, he hit me in the back with whatever block and teach them something about friendship and forgiveness. Then we get to go back to our conversation.
The day that I came over with Juliet, I mean, she was maybe 2 months old. But I remember you and I talking and setting the like, hey, they're going to interrupt. We're going to pick back up. Like, this is our conversation. And it was going great. But we had to stop. And I've told a few people this. We had to stop because Joshua, you looked down and he had opened up a pill bottle. And you went, Josh, did you open that yourself? And you looked at me and you said, 1 second, Katie. And then I remember you like getting down on his eye level and being like, new house rule. Josh was not allowed to open this without, and you had to like fully just go into full parent mode of like, oh no, child-proof medicine. Like my oldest now opens this on his own. Didn't teach him that. He just figured it out. It was just great to see that flip in your brain. And you were like, I don't care what we're talking about. I gotta set some boundaries now.
Yes, that's hilarious. I have no recollection of that. So that's amazing that you remember that. Yeah, I mean, that's the way it goes. And I love Deuteronomy 6 talks about that we talk about the ways of the Lord when we walk by the side of the road, when we lie down, when we get up, and we put them on the door frames of our household. And that's a passage that our church spends time having parents study before they go to dedicate their children. And one of the things that I have loved about the passage is the wholeness of it, that we learn about God when we're at home and we learn about God when we're out and about, and we learn about Him in all aspects of our lives. And so with parenting, we don't just parent our kids in these one on one moments. Our whole life is parenting. We're living our life and we're at the grocery store and teaching our kid, like, this is how you pick out a good cucumber. And then 2 seconds later, you're like, no, you can't climb out of the cart. And then my 5-year-old is talking about, Mom, why do carts have wheels? And you're like, what would happen if they didn't have wheels? And she goes into 8 minutes about flying grocery carts. And you're listening to her creativity and thinking, maybe I should patent her ideas. And then you're sitting at the breakfast table and somebody's throwing out a question about God or the moon. Parenting is letting them see your life and walk alongside you in all of these different places. It's all invitations to learn and wonder about what God has created. I think the more that we as moms feel interrupted and want our own space and we want to have an adult conversation, and goodness, can I just drink this cup of hot tea while it's hot instead of microwaving it 20 times and finding it the next morning in the microwave? Like, the more we can see all of those things as invitations instead of interruptions, it becomes more beautiful. And it's not easier because it's still really hard, but it becomes almost more accessible to our hearts.
It's setting a good expectation as well, right? I think that can be one of the hardest things about becoming a mom at first, is that you don't have the right expectation. So your only expectation is pre-mom. When I talk with my friends who are not parents, sometimes I have to tell them, like, hey, she's going to come over and ask to be up and ask to be down, and you don't have to stop talking. I can acknowledge her and pick her up or put her down or play with her for a second, and you can keep going. But like, I have to set that expectation or else they feel like they're being rude by not stopping talking when she starts talking. And I'm like, she's 18 months old. She's being rude at all times. But we haven't figured out manners yet.
Yes.
So something that I've heard you say a few times, the word season. Man, before becoming a mom, this was not part of my vocabulary. And now all of my friends have heard me say something along the lines of, I'm working on living within my season. But I've heard you say season as well, because every season is so different.
I think one of the things I talk about when I had my firstborn, every developmental stage seemed so long. Then with subsequent children, each developmental stage seemed much more manageable because I knew there was an end. I'd lived through it once before and I knew, this is going to be short-lived and then it's going to resolve in 10 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Nothing is forever. And I'm even seeing that with my 3-year-old, my 5-year-old, or my 7-year-old.
I hope I have that wisdom in the next pregnancy, Rebecca. Remind me of that when I am like, this is never going to end. I am perpetually pregnant. I live by the toilet, just throwing up. This is my home now. To start to wrap up, I have 2 closing questions. My first one is, I love moms helping moms. You've been a great mom who has helped me. And I would just love to know if there is another mom who has impacted your experience.
Honestly, been a lot of moms. I don't think there's just any one mom. It's part of why I love what you're doing here, as kind of every mom has something to share. As I look back over my years of parenting, it was just walking alongside other women who were usually a little bit ahead of me, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. They were talking honestly about what they were experiencing. And I think as they talked honestly about what they were experiencing, whether it was a kid with food allergies or a kid who they were discovering was neurodivergent, or oh my goodness, just so many different things are popping into my head. How to do hospitality in the season with younger children. Whatever it was they were working on, they shared that with me. And when I hit that season, it was more accessible to me because I had seen somebody else walk through the process and I'd seen them come out of it. They'd been open with their story to the point that I could be like, oh, hey, what was that allergist? And another mom was recently just talking to me about navigating sleepovers with her preteen. And I am so grateful for those different women who have just been open and shared where they are with me as they're in the middle of whatever it is that I've gotten to pray with and walk alongside.
I love that. Okay, last one. It's a hard hitter, mostly because it's like, narrow everything down. Because I just want to ask if you could give one piece of encouragement, just one, but to a mom listening today, what would it be?
Read your Bible. Read a verse, read a chapter, read for a minute, listen to it in the car, pull it up on your phone, have it on your Kindle, have it on your nightstand, have it on your couch. Pick up God's word. It is living and active. God has spoken to us, there's encouragement. Read the Psalms, read the Gospels, read Philippians. Pick up your Bible, open it somewhere, and read something that the God of the ages has spoken to us to learn from him and to connect with him. I do think over time, the consistency of just opening God's word has been a blessing for me and the biggest lifeline of motherhood.
All right, I'm going to send you a pic tomorrow of me reading my Bible. Text me if I don't.
I can't wait.
And that is a wrap on episode 2. Everything mentioned in this episode, such as books or toys, are linked in the show notes. If there is a mom that you think we should have on the show, fill out the form linked in the Instagram bio. Thanks for listening to At Home with Littles. If you found something helpful, encouraging, or just plain relatable today, would you share this episode with a mom friend? Word of mouth is the very best way to help this podcast grow and reach more moms like you. You can find us on Instagram. Our handle is @HomeWithLittlesPod. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops.